Started. Thank you, Holly.
You're
I am
welcome. I'll move you to co-host.
okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
I am not on camera today because I have COVID. So I am actually very proud of myself for just being upright in a chair and not and actually hosting a meeting right now. In the attendees list, I see we have Chief Skinner and we have Trinae who will be taking minutes for us. Holly took my notes from our last meeting and turned them into a minute format. So I would looking at Scott or William to give us a motion to approve the minutes from December 5th.
Approved. Aye.
Excellent. We'll make that work. So we had a few follow-up items from the previous meeting. One of them that we had asked Holly to follow up on is that the pre-employment polygraph is actually prohibited in the state of Oregon, and that is why we don't have that at EPD. The employee drug usage policy, there was a lot of information that was pulled for us. Dr. Booker, I believe you had brought up the question about what constitutes the drug usage, what do the specific rules say? And so I'm going to share my screen and we can look at the poll. Are you able to see the screen that has the committee agenda on it?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay, great. Trinae has her hand up. Do I need to promote her to panelist? Yeah, I don't see an option to promote her. All right. There we go. Trinae, I see your hand up.
Thank you. Yeah, I have to be able to reach you, and I need you since I can't see actually who is all present. Usually I can see who's present off to the side, who's logged in, and I have the ability to speak with you. I need you to state who first and who seconded because I can't, especially with our Commissioner Lemons speaks so quietly.
All right, we'll say that Commissioner Lemons made the motion and it was seconded by William Parham.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you for keeping us honest, Trinae. We appreciate your attendance. So regarding the employee drug usage policy, part of the documentation that was sent to me was the City of Eugene employee handbook as far as that's the conduct that's required of all city employees. It did say violations of the policy will be handled on a case-by-case basis. I'm not sure what APM means, but it seems pretty standard for the entire city organization. Good morning, Chief Skinner.
Good morning, everyone.
Also in Eugene Police Employees Association, so that's the union, and that contract is Article 40. Wasn't able to highlight this one on my screen, but there are definitions about the use of alcohol and drugs and what will be tolerated or requires to be called out before reporting for duty. Dr. Booker, did you have any follow-up questions about that information?
Not right now. I'm still going through the handbook, but not at this current moment.
I know. It was a lot of information that got set out for this meeting. So then the next thing on the item, and I'm actually really glad that the chief is here. I wasn't expecting your attendance this morning, Chief, but it's a welcome surprise. Would you like to dig into the post-critical incident mental health evaluation? So I'm not putting words in your mouth.
Yeah, I can. I'll take the impromptu.
Thanks.
Challenge. Yes, that's fine. I don't know if it was last meeting or meeting before last. I want to apologize to the subcommittee because I made a really bad assumption based on my prior experience, both in Richland, Washington, which has a very similar Senate bill, as well as Hillsborough PD, which was governed under Senate Bill 111, around the return to duty mental health evaluations, and made that assumption that those are conducted before somebody returns to work. Both the deputy in chief and I, who came from Salem, that also operates under 111, both made that wrong assumption, and then found out that that's actually not the case. That under Senate Bill 111 here in Eugene, they've not taken it to that more extreme and maybe probably more comprehensive step of requiring the mental health evaluation happening before there was a return to duty, and sticking with the strict language found in Senate Bill 111, as you see highlighted here. Thank you, Vice Chair Hawkins, for putting this up, where it identifies that we will pay for 2, they're required to go to 1 session within the 6 months of their critical incident. The interesting piece on this, as you can see under subsection C, is that this is not a condition of employment. So it's not, we throw the term fit for duty around a lot in a lot of different areas, some of which fit for duty evaluations are a condition of employment under certain circumstances. In this particular case, this may not be substituted for a fitness for duty evaluation for condition of employment. So the employee has an opportunity to see a provider of their choosing, which we find, many of our employees are already under the care of somebody in their family that they're comfortable with going to see. In the event that they don't have somebody, we certainly help provide resources for them to pick a provider to be able to do that. But one of the questions I'm sure that's coming up in your minds is, whether we should effort to try and negotiate and bargain something a little bit more comprehensive than what's in Senate Bill 111, and to see if we can get to a place that before an officer is returned to duty post critical incident, and we have to be a little bit careful about defining critical incident. That shows up in a lot of different areas. Just specifically in Senate Bill 111 is the deadly force protocol for Lane County. Every county has one. So the assumption could be this critical incident is an officer involved shooting, and whether or not they should get that mental health evaluation prior to returning to work, which in some cases might be easy to do within those first few weeks while they're gone. In other cases, it might prolong a person's return to work. And so we want to be careful about the logistics and the mechanics of being able to do that. So in a nutshell, that's where we're at. And I know that this committee is taking mental health and wellness very seriously, and that's certainly a very serious subject, especially for an officer that's been involved in the shooting.
All right, Dr. Booker, kick it off with the questions.
All right. Yes, in terms of understanding when to make or not really make, but follow through with an officer seeing a mental health professional. I would think like any kind of internal affairs complaint or investigation, any kind of public complaint that's found to be credible, or any civilian review board complaint would be enough to prompt 111 to be, or officer to be evaluated. Because I know you.
Yeah, I don't. There's nothing that triggers a mental health evaluation as a result of a internal affairs investigation. Understand, internal affairs investigations happen for a variety of reasons. I mean, it could be everything from a rudeness complaint to a pursuit to to use of force. I mean, it's across the board. There are certainly some behaviors that you could suggest that maybe there does need to be an evaluation. But the key here is, and the thing that's really important to remember is, a mental health evaluation can't should not ever be a springboard or tangential to discipline, because
But
it
it,
cannot be a condition of employment.
yeah, it just doesn't seem like there's any kind of standard of professionalism when it comes to prompting this kind of thing. Like there's no standard being set. Like there's no effort or put forth to make a standard to say, as police chief, this is what I would do going forward to set a standard. And if this standard is not met or sub performance, there's no standard of professionalism. That's what I'm saying. So this is just like, well, there's nothing to prompt this, so it is what it is. And I don't think that is very like um I just see more could be done, put it that way, in terms of making sure there's a professional performance standard being set instead of just saying it is what it is type of thing.
I've seen an opportunity here for us to help develop a recommendation for a policy that will document that standard so that moving forward, we have that and it's known to us and to the police department. Commissioner Parham, I see your hand up as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to use this as an opportunity to ask the chief in the department what rubrics the EPD is, I guess, willing to take or to formulate to so that there can start to be a more comprehensive mental health screen process for officers that were involved in. I know right now you're trying to like make it for deadly force, but I think like any type of like firearm discharge, and then it even goes into like if someone has to fight. But yeah, that would be my question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some opportunity to recognize that, like I said earlier, that critical incidents show up in a variety of ways for our officers that experience that different. I mean, we've had officers, and we have shepherded officers through their wellness journey post really bad child abuse investigation. We have officers that look at child pornography and see horrific things on a daily basis, and we make sure that they are able to avail themselves of mental health check-ins and those types of things. We've administered admin leave for officers that need to be away for a little while to take care of family and themselves. And so while it's not codified in policy, because it's not a one-size-fits-all, and we can't certainly write a policy for every unique circumstance, we try to work really, really closely through our peer support team to make sure that we understand where officers are at and what help they need. And we absolutely allow them to be away without any reduction in pay to be able to get that help. And we have several of those success stories that we've had. So, but there's some areas that we can entertain. The piece that's always not spoken about as far as the mechanics of this is that, you know, we have it's a labor management type of relationship where this type of mandate would be a bargainable change in work practice for our officers, and we would have to bargain this with the union to understand that this would be the expectation and that we would be requiring this. And so that's a mechanism that we would have to take into consideration. We don't have the ability to just write a policy and bless it and then tell every employee that you will adhere to this policy.
Dr. Booker.
The lieutenant that's over the professional standards office, does he actually have an OI on professional standards?
We don't have a lieutenant that is managing professional standards. We have a civilian manager who has been with us for 18 or 20 years that has been doing this work. She's kind of the professional staff oversight of professional standards.
And does she have an OI on her expectations of professional standards that we could review?
I don't understand what an OI is.
Operating instruction. Like
Um,
what's expected? What's expected under those professional standards?
yeah, we have a full policy on professional standards, and um, on that in that division, and then there's the processes that we follow that are governed not only by our policies but by EPA contract, as well as outlined by the auditors, the independent auditors office, and their ordinance language that involves, basically tells us how they're interwoven into this civilian oversight model.
Okay. Chair, with your permission, could we request to get see the policy on professional standards? That's
Yeah,
been
Chief,
out.
can you tell us if is that an EPD policy, or is it through a different organization, like through the city of Eugene? Is that actual EPD policy?
Yeah, I think it's actually an EPD policy, because we're the only one that have a special professional standards, a specific professional standards function.
Okay, thank you. I wanted to make sure it was still within our
And the
purview.
auditor's office governs all EPD employees, not just officers. So they have the entirety of the organization.
Okay, then yes, we will definitely, Dr. Booker, make our request for that. Chief, could you tell us a little bit about how the current process goes for an officer involved in a critical incident, as far as any report that you receive of whether or not the officer should return to duty? And then could you expand a little bit on your dream world if you were the king for a day and you got to have everything working perfectly and there were unicorns and cupcakes involved?
Yeah, that like it outlines in Senate Bill 111, it's not a report that comes to me. This is a report. This is between the provider and the employee. And we would expect that what we've learned is that if an officer, after a shooting has occurred, for instance, and the officer, through their provider, I'll have to double check, but my understanding is much like being off on medical leave, the provider gives a clearance to come back to work. We don't get any details of that. We don't get, it's protected health information. It's between the employee and the provider. It's not our person, even though we pay for it. And so it's very much employee centric when it comes to that, not employer centric with regards to return to duty.
Who does receive the report, Chief?
I do have no idea who sees the report. My guess is that it would go to HR, the central function of HR in our department, but I don't know that for sure. We certainly don't. We don't keep we keep a certain aspect of employee personnel records here, but the mothership keeps all employee personnel records down at HR. So, but I can double check on that and see who sees that, if anything, if anyone. And one of the challenges is under some section C, where it talks about not be substituted for a fitness for duty examination requested as a condition of employment. So we would never offer it as a condition of employment. Otherwise, we'd be in violation of Senate Bill 111. In a best case scenario, it would be officers involved in a shooting. They're on administrative leave. There's a lot of coexisting things that are happening with the investigation that would either prompt an officer to or not come back outside of this particular issue. Ideally, what I've seen happen in other agencies I've worked in is that we've had two things happen. Number one, there's a reacclimation training for the officer. So, for instance, either out at the firearms range or in a scenario-based environment, that we put them through training to see, that's very similar to what they went through, to see how they perform, see how they absorb that, see if there's stressors there that before we put them back out on the street, if there's stressors there that need to be addressed. And there would be this check-in with a mental health provider to make sure that they are ready to return to work. In my other agencies, we were able to accomplish this within a couple of weeks post-shooting. In this particular, and again, up in Hillsborough, there's a lot more providers at our disposal up in the Portland metro area. Down here, it's a little bit more problematic. That doesn't mean I'm that doesn't mean I'm against keeping people away from work until we're able to do that. They're certainly on our dime. There's no disadvantage to them financially at all, but it is a little bit more logistically problematic down here. So ideally, I'd love to have those two things happen before somebody comes back to work.
Commissioner Parham?
Yeah, I was just curious, is there any way to see the actual procedure that you put the officers through after like that the gun range?
Yeah, I mean, I think we could it's kind of an experiential thing, Commissioner Parham. I mean, we've always invited people to come and see our training or see the type of training that we would provide, even just on a day-to-day basis and in service or post shooting, the type of thing that we would provide to do that. That's not anything that's we're concerned about, showing anybody. It'll be individually based. Ideally, in my former agency, it was individually based, especially with the scenarios that we were maybe putting those folks through. We certainly take them out to the range. We requalify them on their weapon, make sure there's no stress in handling the weapon post shooting, making sure that they're feeling comfortable with the weapon system, and we're happy to kind of demonstrate that or set up an opportunity to demonstrate what that might look like.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
So for the committee, I would love for sorry, COVID brain is not working right now today. I would definitely want to bring this to the General Police Commission as a body with our strong recommendation that a policy be developed to address some of the gaps that have been identified in the chief's research. Could I get a motion from somebody? Actually, I can make the motion because I'm just a committee chair, but can I get a second for that, please, to take it to the General Police Commission? Thank you, Dr. Booker.
Second.
So, Chief, I appreciate your frank and forthcomingness with that information. Next, I wanted to spend a few minutes on the email that the Police Commission received from Officer Cardwell. Trinae, I see your hand.
Yes. Can you please state again the first and second?
Sorry, yes, I made the motion
also,
and Dr. Booker seconded.
Sorry, you made the motion and then he seconded. Okay. And then also if you could try to get in the habit of wording your motions exactly how you would like them to be.
Yes,
Thank
I can
you.
certainly work on that. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So Officer Cardwell, right before the ice storm or during the ice storm, we all received the email from Officer Cardwell. There's a lot of it that is not at all within the purview of the Police Commission, since our job is to review policy. That being said, another one of our jobs is to help liaise between the police department and the community. And something like this certainly carries a lot of ramifications for at least 50% of the population. So we will bring it. I know that the chief will be addressing it at the General Police Commission meeting on Thursday evening, but as far as where it pertains to recruitment and retention and mental health and wellness, if a large body of officers is not feeling welcomed or supported in their work culture, that part I believe does fall under mental health and wellness. So I wanted to get thoughts from the commissioners on this committee. Dr. Booker.
Yeah, I was when I first read the email, I was very troubled by it, considering what was said at the last police commission meeting, and I think there's some correction that had to be made with what was said, and I think that's what prompted this email. Was this particular officer trying to correct what was stated or what she felt was misstated in the police commission by the female officer that was there speaking, which prompted her, I guess, to respond and send us this email. The most troubling thing about this that I feel is that speaks to exactly why this committee was formed, is there is no safe place for officers, for the good officers to be identified versus the bad ones. And there's this public, it's like this public support for all officers, like all officers are good and all officers do the right thing, and all officers are protected by the union. They're protected by so many roadblocks of holding accountability. We, even as a committee, police commission, have issues with trying to create policy of change within an atmosphere that protects itself from being changed. So I kind of feel like this speaks to this committee in terms of we have to figure out how to create policy around creating a safe place. I felt like this should have been more taken more seriously by city council. I feel like they should have had their hands and claws on this as soon as they were made privy to this, instead of this being one of those swept under the rug type of situations. But this speaks volumes to why the good officers cannot be identified, why there's so much distrust with the community and the officers, because the bad ones are always protected over the good ones. And her email stated best at the end. When things go bad, good people leave, eventually followed by people who thought they could change, but got buried because too many good people left. Those left are bad people or hostages. That speaks volumes to mental health, and the way people feel imprisoned and unable to speak their truth or speak what they feel, out of fear of retribution within a department that protects itself from scrutiny and weeding out those bad officers. This email should set alarms to everybody in the department that change is needed, especially when it comes to the good officers wanting to be heard, wanting change, wanting to do the right thing, instead of being a part of the good old boys club where it's get along, get down, or get off, or whatever they feel, it's not being heard. And for her to say this many people left, and a lot of them being females, I don't even know why there's not a internal, like a internal affairs investigation on this. It just baffles me how so many of these females are saying this, and nothing's being done about it. This speaks greatly to this commission. So that's all I have to say for now on this until we discuss it further. But I'm glad that you said and brought this to our committee, because this is the purview of why we need a safe place for mental health within our people who serve the public, i.e. officers, fire department, officials who deal with criminal activity on a daily basis, or just the public at large. A safe place is needed for mental health. And I think hopefully this committee could make a difference and influence the change that is greatly needed within the department if this many females feel this way and they are not being heard.
Well, I know that the retention policy is on the agenda for our meeting on Thursday evening. And so I'm sure as a group, as a body, we'll be covering that in our usual amount of detail. Chief Skinner, can you give us your 60-second response to that?
I think I'll wait for Thursday, because I think there are parts of Commissioner Booker's comments that I think are coming from a very, very sincere place, and I'll want to address those. And then there's, I think, some parts of that are painting with a broad brush the feeling of an entirety of an organization, and that's not fair to the females that have had amazing experiences with NEPD. And again, I've been here for 5.5 years. I cannot speak to the culture prior to my arrival, but I think we should never make any assumptions about everybody's experience based on a single email that we've gotten from Kirsten. The other thing is, I'll just let the committee know, Kirsten Cardwell has been and will always be a member of the EPD family. And so I will not be speaking about this email on Thursday, because that is not, that's not the way I'm built. That's not fair to her. She's going to go on and have an amazing career at Springfield and do whatever she feels like she needs to do in her career. And so while I don't fully agree with the email based on some of the nuances that are not shared, I'm not going to ever disparage Kirsten in an open public meeting for sure. And so I don't want to, definitely don't want to do that. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, I'm really careful about this becoming a male versus female issue. Toxicity in an organization happens across all genders. It's not a male versus female thing. And we've got some amazing male advocates and allies for our female employees. And I don't ever want to go down the path where we alienate them. And one of the things that we do intentionally is raise up and celebrate the really, really good behaviors that are happening within the organization. And many of the things that we've done, whether it's internal affairs investigation, me separating people from employment as a result of bad behavior, one really good sign from within the organization is many of those are internally generated, where it's other employees that are witnessing this behavior and bringing it forth to be recognized. It's not something that is tolerated within the organization, and it's an organization of 329 right now, 329 people. So there's a lot of moving parts to that. So we'll talk a little bit more on Thursday. I'm happy to answer any questions, but just know that I'll have some sensitivities around making this an us versus Kirsten Cardwell type of conversation, because she's a really cool person, and I'm happy for her, and she'll forever be a part of the family. And so I'm just not going to go down that path.
I appreciate you taking the attention to both sides of that, Chief. Commissioner Parham?
Yeah, my questions are just pretty cut and dry, but I think the first things that raise are like, how many female identifying officers are actually in the force? How many female officers are in supervisory roles? And what does the career trajectory look like for those female officers? And then my last question, which kind of, I guess, would be around reporting and procedures, would be, is there a tool currently, or is there a survey that EPD does anonymously so that officers can report kind of like culture, or just like how they feel about how the department is headed, or the direction, or just work culture? Thank you.
I think we'll probably get answers to most of those on Thursday. I know that Holly's been doing a bunch of legwork getting all that put together. I wanted to introduce you folks to Pat Bentley, a lady that I was introduced to through the woman who runs 15th Night, actually. And Pat Bentley has established a magnificent career working in law enforcement mental health. And so I asked her to come talk to our group about the program that she works with, and some of the wins, and some of the maybe recommendations of things to either implement or not even try at all, but to give some of that perspective that you bring us from California. Pat?
Well, good morning. I'm always cautious, you know, from California. I am not, this is nothing like trying to come in and say, this is the way you need to do it, because I'm really not the authority on that anyway. My specialty is counseling law enforcement. I do the critical incident debriefings for the sheriff's office in Kern County, which is a very active department. So we have a community of about 700,000, very high crime rate. So I think what I'd like to do is first hear some of the questions you might have related to that, getting some sort of a trauma thing put together here so I can be more specific. Does that make sense? Like, I'd really like to hear from the chief what he needs. What do you think? Critical incident debriefs, anything like that?
Well, those, you know, first of all, it's interesting because when we think about critical incident, that's a fairly general and broad topic in our world, as you know. Some people think about critical incidents being just police officer involved shootings. But critical incidents can show up in a variety of different ways for officers that need to be debriefed and or need to have an opportunity to avail themselves of counseling. I mean, some of our most damaged police officers are those police officers that are dealing day to day with child sexual and physical abuse, for instance. And we often forget about them, that every single day that they're in a space where they're dealing with these things. So the first thing would be to try to identify, okay, what would trigger kind of a critical incident debrief, and where would we, how do we get our arms kind of around that? The easy one is the officer involved shooting, because that's externally focused. It's of high community concern. Those officers taking the life or the deadly use of force, whether it results in serious physical injury or death, is something that is of high community concern here, and I totally get that. But there is a variety of different areas of the organization that need this type of help. Our peer support team is a really, really strong team that comes alongside many of these individuals when it comes to this in an environment for a debrief. One of the things that we lack here because of our size is qualified mental health providers that really specialize in this area of public safety. As you know, it's not a one size fits all. Now, we may have some employees that are already have a provider. Maybe they have a family therapist that they feel really comfortable with, that they can lean on. But as a rule, it's been my experience that having a provider that really understands the nuances of public safety is kind of a niche field, and that's
Right.
really to find the right type of person. And last thing I'll say, and aside from thank you for joining us, by the way, the last thing I will say is that we're constantly trying to write some grants, and I don't know if it's through Bureau of Justice Administration or the COPS office, but I would love to have a licensed mental health professional embedded within the police department for a variety of these types of things as a part of the staff. I mean, that's the goal, is to find a staff member. And I know how hard it is to recruit and find those people. We can't fill other mental health and behavioral health specialty assignments throughout the entirety of the city, let alone somebody that's working at least part-time for the police department. And so that's really what we need, is we need a QMHP or something, or a licensed therapist that actually understands the work that we do, that can be a part of kind of the EPD family and be available to us.
Could I ask you a question on that?
Sure.
Have you explored contracting providers? They don't need to be employed full time. That's what we do. We contract. Fit for Duty is a psychologist, which I'm not. I'm an LMFT. But if you can contract with a provider, he or she is not full time with your department. They're available when you need a return to duty, fit for duty, that kind of stuff. And with us, like, I'm contracted to do the critical incidents. So I have a private practice. That's my primary stuff. But then I do anything like that with them when they
we're open to that. We're looking at, we know that's not a full-time job. We're not big enough for this doing this. So we were looking at everything from a contract employee, or what we would call a limited duration employee, contract employee, to somebody working part-time. One of the real challenges is just not having a lot of there's just not a lot of providers in our area that really this has to be something you really want to understand and want to embrace, and you have to build as you know, you have to build relationships with these professionals. It's a tough nut to crack.
Right. Well, I was really interested in getting involved up here, but then there's the Oregon Licensing Board, which it frustrated me immensely. So I'm still, but I would love to get involved if I can get that through. They want records from 30 years ago, my clinical records, which we're not required to keep those. So we're still working on that.
Sorry, Pat, Dr. Booker has a hand up.
Ms. Bentley, you mentioned that you deal with critical incidents on a normal basis. Could you give us a list of some of those critical incidents that you've encountered, like maybe 5 to 10, or that you in your career that you've had to deal with?
Well, I think what Chief Skinner is saying is accurate. For a critical incident, it's line of duty death, officer involved shooting. And we've had it in existence for so long. It took 18 years to get this. It's been 18 years that we've been doing it. And it took probably 5 years for deputies to start feeling confident with it. We emphasize this isn't a tactical review. This is completely confidential. That's why you need a therapist, because it works under our license. Completely confidential. And anything we say in that debrief remains that way. So typically, they're debriefed with their detectives or investigators on the incident, and then we conduct the critical incident. So most of them are OIS, LODD, and it's usually determined on scene. But sometimes deputies ask to have it done, and we will always do that.
No, I'm just talking about something you could speak on that you've handled in the past, like just examples of critical incidents that you've encountered that you've had to.
Oh, okay. So, well, I'll give you one right off the bat. A baby recently, the father shot and killed her and the mother. There's an example. There was no gunfire by our deputies, but that was devastating to deputies, many of whom had children. So we definitely did one. They requested it. We would have done it anyway. I think a lot of it is based on common sense.
Any that didn't involve shooting, any kind of critical incidents?
Well, that didn't involve a shooting. Oh, you mean even with the offender?
More so with the officers than the offender.
Yeah, see, there wasn't a shooting in that one. The
Okay.
offender, and he killed himself. I'm sorry. He killed them and then he killed himself.
Okay, I get that, but I'm talking about more critical incidences with officers that you've encountered, that you've had to.
Without a shooting involved?
Right.
It's early. You're making me think.
I'm just trying to get in, because you've been doing this a long time, right?
Right.
So you closed out a lot of cases. So
Well, I didn't. They do. All I do is meet with the officers, right?
right. So
And dispatch. That's another thing. Big important. Dispatch should be there. Anyway, go ahead.
just over the course of your career, the different critical incidents, like the examples, like this is a critical incident, this is a critical incident, like not so much in depth of what happened, but just for it to be a critical incident. I know it's not like a broad thing, like you had specific things that you had to address. So I'm just saying,
Well, the only reason I'm hesitant with that, I don't determine the critical incident. That's not part of my job. They call me and say, we have this, and then we get it set up. That really should be left to the discretion of the department. They define their critical incidents. I mean, I can help with that if they want it, but actually the commander that handles our stuff decides that. And he's happy to meet with you. I've talked with all of them. So,
Okay.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to evade it, but I don't determine it. They will call me sometimes for a consultation and say, this is like the baby one, the baby death. Here's the situation. I said, definitely, we need to get it done, and we need to get it done soon. Because typically you want to do it within the first 48 hours. But the problem with that is oftentimes they want to run the investigation first, which I understand. But within 72 hours, we try to get it done.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I didn't answer your question, I'm sorry, but I really think it comes from the department to make that determination.
Nah,
You
it's
agree,
okay.
Chief Skinner?
I would agree in the sense that we should never make any assumptions about how somebody experiences something that they see, feel in the field. And I'll just speak to my own issue. I can remember as a young deputy in Benton County, going to a single vehicle rollover, and I may have shared this story, but single vehicle rollover. And when I arrived and found the vehicle in a ditch, about 100 yards down the road was a baby seat that was upside down in the middle of the road. The way I handled that pre having kids and the way that I would handle that now after having kids is two completely different things.
Exactly.
But the fact that this happened 27 years ago, and the fact that I can, it feels like it happened yesterday when I turned that baby seat over, would be exactly what I'm talking about.
Right.
With respect to how that hits us in different ways. And so I'm never going to assume that something should be critical or not critical for an officer based on their experience.
You gave a really good example, because in situations, this is something I wanted to emphasize, in situations where possibly one person is impacted, like I can pick that up doing a critical incident debrief, but oftentimes we don't. There may be one officer that's triggered by something out on a call, and there may be 6 people that respond to that call that do just fine. I mean, I see it in OISs. There's some people are affected. Anyone is affected when they shoot and kill someone. They may say the guy was a slime ball, we're glad he's gone, but they're impacted. But some just handle it better than others. I try to identify who's having difficulty, and I use my peer support team. It's phenomenal, and several of them come to the debriefs, and then we'll talk about it afterward, and I'll say, what did you think about the guy or the girl, blah, blah, blah. We've had dispatchers impacted. Those people we then refer to a trauma therapist, not a family therapist that doesn't know law enforcement. We have a team of, I think it's 13 therapists that are trained in trauma, and we're going to refer out to them.
Okay. Just so
Because
you know,
what you hear from deputies, I'm sorry, but just final on that, what you hear from deputies, we send them to an EAP, and the provider, I mean, EAP, a lot of times new therapists, inexperienced, and they end up being more traumatized by hearing the story, and the cop is sitting there comforting them. They're not getting any help. So that's why I've pushed for years and years to get referral base. So when, even if we haven't done a CISM, if someone calls, we now have a number, and a deputy, fire, EMTs can make a call to that, and they're immediately put with a trauma therapist, and it's paid for through donation. We have a huge set of donors now, and it's taken a long time to get it into place. It's not easy, but once you do, it's extremely successful.
Vice Chair, just so you know, I was trying to get just the point of questioning is trying to understand the definition of critical incidents and how, from a mental health standpoint, we can create policy around examples, incident examples of critical incidents in reference to just creating like a mental health policy around officers. But first, it doesn't seem to be defined really as what exactly a critical incident is. It seems to be very broad. So that's just what I'm trying to understand, Chair.
One of the things we can do, Commissioner Booker, is you could build some language that would call out some of the obvious things, and then have some language in there that would suggest to it, but then also have language in there to encompass an officer that would want to initiate this based on their either perception, or we could massage the language where we can do both. I think where we say, in these situations, we know that this kind of debrief needs to take place, and open it up for voluntary debrief for other incidents that are not listed there. So I think there's a way to get you to yes on that. I know what you're kind of talking about. And I think there's a way to get you to yes.
I got
Can
you.
I throw in a quick suggestion that might help you too, Mr. Booker, or Dr. Booker, I think, if you educate your sergeants and your lieutenants. Do you have sergeants and lieutenants? Is that your hierarchy? they're the ones that need to first be educated about critical incident, because you're going to get resistance from deputies until they learn they're not going to be judged in this. It's not tactical. And I'll tell you, that was the critical force with us, because we had some old timers that just, you know, their whole thing was go out and drink it away or whatever. And they didn't want to do this. And they don't want to see, you know, they don't want a therapist involved. It helped. My husband was in law enforcement, and he helped, I think, to smooth some of those rough edges. But the key is being able to sit down with Chief Skinner, your staff, your supervising staff, and get them on board first, because you know your officers respect their, hopefully respect their sergeants, the lieutenants, and you want to minimize the resistance as much as you can before you implement the process. If you do that, then some of Dr. Booker's concerns are going to be addressed, because once deputies start feeling comfortable with the process, and let me say, supervisors are not allowed at the debrief, anything above sergeant, and I make that determination going in, but even sergeants, there are times we're not going to allow them in there, but it's line staff. So dispatchers can cry. This is where they just vent their stuff, and most times this takes care of it. They just need to be able to process the issue. And to me, I don't care. We've had some that really were not critical incidents, but the responders wanted the CISM, and they get it. Does that help?
Yeah, it helps. It helps with just moving the conversation forward, and I definitely get what you're saying. But it is important that the officers definitely have a definitive definition of what critical incident is, so they have an understanding. And then I'm pretty sure, like you said, through their understanding, we'll be more understanding of how to make policy when it pertains to mental health around critical incidences. But it seems like it's very broad, so there's like no definitive thing.
Intentionally so. We keep it broad, because if you start adding a lot of restrictions to that, then they're still in that same mode of tactical. We want to leave it where, you know, if you're coming out of an incident and it's bothering you, put a word into your sergeant, and that's why they're imperative, because the sergeant is the one that gets it rolling, not individual deputies. So maybe some of what you're talking about, you can structure it by educating your lieutenants and your sergeants.
Thank you, Ms. Bentley.
Yeah,
I think that's a great step. We've got 7 minutes left, and I want to let Pat return to her day. Thank you so much for joining us, Pat. And she
Thank
has
you.
offered to come to return to us if we request her attendance again. But I thought that brings a wealth of experience to our conversations that we may not have otherwise.
Well, I admire what you guys are looking into, and I'll help in any way.
Thank you very much, Pat.
Thank you.
All right, so we needed to discuss the future meeting cadence. And the reason why is because the city of Eugene has determined that we have to have our city staffer available for our meeting for the duration of the meeting. So since Holly drops off her son at school in the morning, the 8 o'clock time slot is not going to work anymore. So I will be sending out an email to try to get some responses on other times that may work for I guess the core 5 of us, the 4 commissioners and Holly and periodically Chief Skinner. So if you have any recommendations of times that may work, feel free to throw them out. Otherwise, we'll try to hash it out over email. Just be aware that cadence will be changing. And then for next steps, we agreed that we will bring the issue of the return to duty evaluation not necessarily being a set in stone requirement. We're going to bring that to Police Commission. And then did you want to have more conversations with Pat Bentley? Do you want to keep discussing the issues brought up by Officer Cardwell? We're a committee, so I'm not the only voice here.
Well,
I'm sorry. Yeah, and go ahead, Dr. Booker. I just can't figure out how to raise my hand on this device, but Go for it.
Oh, no, go ahead, Scott. I've been talking enough. I'll go after you.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I very much think that we need to hear from Chief Skinner at the next police commission meeting. And I thank you, Vice Chair, and well, Chair of this subcommittee, for bringing that to this agenda. I think it fully falls under the purview of mental health and wellness. So I think that should be back on our agenda for sure
Okay.
for next meeting.
Okay. Commissioner Parham?
Yeah, I'm just gonna second a lot of what Scott just said because culture affects mental health and mental health affects culture. And if an officer felt the need to write an email after, that speaks a lot to the perceived culture of allegedly five different officers.
It does. Thank you for that. Dr. Booker?
Definitely would like to have the critical incidents stay on the agenda.
Okay.
What I was alluding to, for instance, I was deployed. We had a female to get sexually assaulted in a deployed location. That's a critical incident. And I say that to say this email would allude to a lot of critical incidents. So I feel like Miss Caldwell, wasn't no Harwell wasn't very helpful in terms of trying to get to that point, because I understand there's officer involved shooting, officers on duty, but you have critical incidents that happen within certain situations. For instance, the one I just gave when I was deployed, and there was a situation that occurred out in a deployed location.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were referring to the officer's email. It was Pat Bentley.
Oh yeah.
And I think she made a pretty compelling point, though, that it's difficult to pigeonhole things, and especially if you're trying to put something on paper. One of Chief's favorite phrases that we hear from him is not one size fits all. And so I think Pat was kind of supporting that by saying that there is no set in stone definition, because they don't want to limit the range of these things that could be viewed and treated as critical incidents.
Right, and that's what I said. There's really no definition. Like, is there a critical incident could be exactly the email that we read. I mean, so if there's like no definitive thing, how do we address this from a mental health aspect of to create policy around that? Do you get what I'm saying? Because it makes
Yeah.
and that's why I would like to kind of keep this on. And I'm sorry I mixed the names up. I meant Miss Bentley, not Miss.
That's fine.
But if Miss Bentley can speak more to internal critical incidents rather than just giving us like if she's experienced a lot and she said that she created this safe space for line workers, then there should be a lot more incidents of, okay, I've had something where two officers didn't get along and one got fired or one was racially attacked or somebody said something they shouldn't have said. You know, these are critical incidents that affect the fabric and mental health of a police department, i.e., which would allude to everything she said in the email about people leaving, etc. But again, falls under the mental health aspect as how do we as a committee make policy around something we don't yet understand or grasp or kind of get the full concept of what a critical incident is and what areas it pertains to, or and if you get what I'm saying, that's exactly what but yeah, I'd like to keep it on the agenda.
Dr. Booker, I might add, it might be useful or helpful to you guys to have someone from our PCERT team come and give some examples of some of the critical incident debriefs that they've assisted with, because they do, provide those to the department. They are, they do help with those. So it might be helpful to have maybe the PCERT supervisor come and give some examples or share some of the experiences that they've dealt with.
That's a great suggestion, Holly. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's great. I just want to, I want to make sure that it's not an attack. It's a changing of the environment, and how can Chief Skinner leave his mark, on the police department that will be felt for years to come down, and say this was the standard, this is what it was when I arrived, this is what I did, this is what I encountered while I was there, and this is what I did to make sure that that environment was improved before I left. I left it better than it was when I got there. And that's where I feel like these conversations could help at. It's not an attack, it's a how do we change the fabric and make this environment for our police officers just great, so that we can praise them and we don't have to keep weeding out the bad from the good. But it requires an environmental change within the department.
It does. And since we are at 9 o'clock, I'm going to go ahead and adjourn and be on the lookout for an email trying to figure out a new meeting cadence. And I'll see all of you Thursday evening.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you so much, Chief Skinner.